I was sitting on my couch in sweatpants, an old t-shirt, and socks. The television was on with the sound off. A takeout box sat open on the coffee table, and my work laptop was still showing an inventory report I had promised myself I would finish. There were 3 envelopes near the door that I had not opened. The second dining chair was covered with papers. The windowsill was empty. That was basically my apartment. Functional, quiet, and easy to leave exactly as it was. The first knock was so light I assumed it came from another apartment. The second came maybe 10 seconds later. I stayed where I was. I had become good at that, letting calls ring, leaving messages unanswered, allowing invitations to expire until people stopped asking. Then came the third knock. I closed the laptop and went to the door. A woman stood in the hallway beside a large duffel bag. She wore jeans, a dark jacket, and travel shoes. Her hair was pulled back loosely, and she looked tired in the way people look after spending hours trying to convince themselves everything is still under control. She glanced at the number beside my door. Is this 3B? 3E? She checked again, then looked down the hallway. 3B is over there, I said, pointing. Right. Sorry. She dragged the bag toward the other door and knocked. I should have closed mine, but I stayed there. Nobody answered. She knocked again and pulled out her phone. That apartment's empty, I said. She turned. Are you sure? Pretty sure. The last tenant moved out a few weeks ago. The label's gone from the mailbox downstairs. She stared at the door like it might explain itself. Then she called someone. No answer. She tried again. Still nothing. I'll figure it out, she said. I knew that sentence. I had used it after Audrey left whenever my sister asked whether I needed anything. I had used it at work when people noticed I was staying late. It was what you said when you had no plan, but did not want anyone watching you panic. The woman bent to lift the duffel. It barely moved. How far did you come? I asked. Southern Indiana. Almost 4 hours. To an empty apartment? A former co-worker said I could stay with her. Denise. She stopped answering during the drive. I should have told her about the hotel near the highway. Instead, I heard myself say, you can come in for a few minutes. Charge your phone and make some calls. She did not move. I understood why. Strange building. Strange man. No one expecting her. I opened the door all the way and stepped back. You can stay near the door, I said. I'll make coffee. Nothing more complicated than that. She looked at me carefully. That is usually what complicated people say. Fair. That got the smallest change in her expression. My name's Hannah, she said. Ben. She brought the bag inside, but left it beside the entrance. She kept her jacket on. I cleared the papers from the second chair while she plugged in her phone. Her eyes moved around the room. This place looks like you moved in yesterday and forgot to finish. I've been here 3 years. Her face tightened. Sorry. No, that was accurate. I made coffee while she called Denise 2 more times. Then she searched messages, checked an old social media post, and confirmed the address. Denise had definitely written 3B. Do you know anyone else in Louisville? I asked. No. She explained it in pieces. The furniture store where she worked had closed. Her lease ended that same month. Her relationship had also fallen apart, so she went back to her mother's house while trying to decide what came next. What happened with the relationship? I asked. She looked down at her cup. It didn't explode. It just got quieter until there wasn't anything left to say. That answer hit closer than I expected. I told her about Audrey. Nearly 4 years together. Then one conversation. Audrey had spent months accepting the end before she told me. By the time I understood what was happening, she was already ready to leave. Hannah nodded once. The person who leaves usually gets a head start on the ending. No one had ever said it to me that way. We kept talking. About how embarrassing it felt to need help. About moving back in with family. About how easy it was to stop cooking when nobody else was coming home. Somewhere during that conversation, the coffee stopped being a practical excuse. It got late before Hannah started searching for places to stay. One option cost more than she could manage. Another had reviews mentioning broken locks. The cheaper places were too far away for someone who did not know the city and had no job yet. You can take the couch for tonight, I said. She looked at me again, just as carefully as before. Your bag stays beside you. I'll be in my bedroom with the door closed. You can put the dining chair near the entrance if that makes you feel better. You can leave whenever you want. Why do you trust me? I don't usually trust anyone. Maybe that's why I know what it looks like when someone really needs one decent night. After a moment, she agreed. I gave her a clean blanket, a pillow, a charger, and a glass of water. Nothing special, just what I had. When I went to my room, I looked back once. Hannah was sitting on the couch, checking her phone again. For the first time in months, I could hear another person moving in my apartment. The quiet felt different. The next morning, I expected her to be gone. Instead, I smelled coffee and burned toast. Hannah was in the kitchen wearing her jeans, a clean t-shirt, and socks. She had found eggs, bread, and the one apple one had forgotten was there. "The toaster has a personal issue," she said. "It has been difficult since before you arrived." We ate together. Afterward, she washed the dishes and I dried them. She said she needed toothpaste, clean socks, and a better charger, so I walked with her to the neighborhood market. Near the entrance, a man had a small table of houseplants. Hannah stopped and looked at them, then at me. She chose a jade plant in a plain clay pot. "Your window needs proof that something is expected to stay alive. A plant might be too much responsibility. Then start with one that survives neglect." She paid for it herself and put it on my empty windowsill when we got back. By afternoon, she was at my table applying for jobs. We agreed the couch could remain hers for a few more days, as long as she kept searching for work and another place to stay. On the 5th day, her phone rang while I was finishing a report. She answered, listened, then sat up straighter. When the call ended, she tried to act calm, but she was smiling. "A copy and shipping shop wants me to come in tomorrow," she said. "Just a trial shift." I looked at the plant on the windowsill, then back at her. "That still counts." Hannah's trial shift lasted 6 hours. I knew that because she texted me at the 4-hour mark and said the owner had asked her to stay longer. When I got home, the couch was folded back into its normal shape, her blanket was stacked on one end, and the apartment was empty. I stood there longer than I needed to, holding my keys. 5 days earlier, empty had been normal. Now it felt like someone was late. She came through the door 20 minutes later wearing a temporary badge clipped to her jacket. "How did it go?" I asked. I accepted 12 packages, printed 2 posters, fixed a shipping label, and explained to a man 3 times that we don't control delivery trucks. "So you're already management." I also loaded the printer paper backward. "Executive management." She smiled and set her bag down. The owner had told her to return the next morning. It was not a permanent position, but she would get several shifts that week. If she handled the holiday rush well, there might be more hours. Hannah tried to make it sound small. "It's temporary." "That still counts," I said. We celebrated with pasta, a jar of sauce, and bread that I almost forgot in the oven. Hannah told me about a customer who wanted a poster enlarged but refused to admit the original image was blurry. He kept saying, "Make it clear," she said. Like I had a button for that. "You should label a button, make it clear, and press it slowly while looking serious." She laughed, and I did too. Not the polite sound I used at work when someone made a joke near the loading dock. A real laugh. It surprised me enough that I stopped for a second. Hannah noticed. "You all right?" Apparently. The next 2 weeks developed a routine without either of us planning one. She left early for the shop or the library, depending on her schedule. I went to the warehouse and spent my day checking deliveries, correcting numbers, and explaining to contractors why missing items could not appear just because they were angry. At home, Hannah applied for better positions from the dining table. Some evenings she returned before me and bought groceries. Other evenings I got there first and started dinner. I began opening the blinds in the morning because she said the plant needed light. Then I started opening them even when she had already left. Her jacket appeared on the hook near the door. Her work shoes stayed beside the couch. A book rested on the table with a receipt marking her page. There was a second toothbrush in the bathroom and yogurt in the refrigerator that I knew not to eat. None of it looked permanent. That was probably why I allowed myself to notice it. One night my sister sent me a message asking whether I was still alive. Normally, I would have read it and answered 3 days later. Hannah was sitting across from me, checking job listings. "You're doing the thing," she said. "What thing?" "Looking at your phone like it assigned homework." "It's my sister." "Is she difficult?" "No." "Then the difficulty may be local." I answered the message. My sister called immediately. I almost ignored it, but Hannah pointed at the phone without looking up. I took the call in the kitchen. We talked for 15 minutes. My sister asked why I sounded different. I told her I had been sleeping better. That was true. I had also returned to the small gym near my building twice that week. I cleared the unopened mail from the floor. I stopped staying late at work unless the counts actually required it. Hannah had not ordered me to do any of those things. Her presence just made my habits harder to hide from myself. At the end of the second week, she came home with a new schedule. "They're keeping me through the holiday season," she said. "More hours, too." I cooked dinner that night. Chicken, rice, vegetables. Nothing impressive, but everything finished at roughly the same time, which was progress. Afterward, we stayed at the table with our coffee. Hannah turned her cup slowly between her hands. "This is the part one don't trust," she said. "What part?" "When things start improving." I waited. "My job is working out. I'm saving some money. I don't wake up at my mother's house feeling like my entire adult life disappeared." She looked around the apartment. "Then I start expecting something to go wrong." "I understand that." "I know." The room became quiet, but not the old kind of quiet. I looked at her jacket on the hook, her book on the table, and the shoes near the door. "I like knowing you're coming back," I said. Hannah looked directly at me. "To the apartment?" I should have chosen the safer answer. Instead, I said both. Neither of us moved for a few seconds. Then she reached across the table and placed her hand near mine. "I like coming back," she said. "But I'm still sleeping on your couch." "I know. I need my own place before we decide what this is." She was right. As long as she depended on me for somewhere to sleep, even a simple decision between us would carry too much weight. "I agree," I said. Our hands touched. Then our fingers held briefly. We did not kiss. The next afternoon, the shop owner told Hannah about a furnished room in a house owned by an older woman named Margaret. It was close to the shop, the rent was reasonable, and the room had its own lock. Hannah visited it that evening. I went with her, but waited in the front room while she spoke with Margaret. The house was quiet, clean, and full of framed family pictures. Margaret asked me whether I was Hannah's boyfriend. Hannah answered before I could. "Not yet." Margaret looked at both of us and said, "That sounds unnecessarily complicated." The room had a bed, a small desk, a dresser, and one window facing the side yard. Hannah could afford the deposit after her first paychecks. Her mother agreed to lend her the small amount she was short. 3 days later, I carried the heavy duffel down the worn stairs because the elevator had stopped between floors again. Hannah carried her backpack and the jade plant. The move took one trip. That fact made me feel worse than it should have. At her new doorway, I set the bag beside the dresser. She placed the plant on the desk and looked around. "So," she said, "now I know I'm not here because I need your couch. And I know I miss you because you're you, not because the apartment is quiet." She stepped closer. The kiss was brief and careful. No rush, no confusion. Just a clear answer to something we had both been avoiding saying too soon. After that, we dated slowly. She visited my apartment because she chose to. I went to her room and learned Margaret watched game shows at a volume that reached every part of the house. Hannah and I met for coffee, walked to the market, cooked dinner, and sometimes talked on the phone even though we lived only a few streets apart. A few weeks later, Hannah brought the jade plant back to my apartment. "It gets better light here," she said. "You bought it." "It started here." I put it back on the windowsill. By then, Hannah had her own key to Margaret's house, her own schedule, and enough money to stop counting every purchase. She was no longer returning because she needed somewhere to go. That was when Audrey's name started appearing on my phone again. At first, Audrey's messages were easy to dismiss. "Thinking about you today." Then, a few days later, "I miss how safe everything used to feel." I never answered. I told myself that was proof I had moved on. A reply would mean interest. A meeting would mean confusion. Silence meant the door was closed. That explanation worked until Hannah started noticing what I did every time Audrey's name appeared. I turned my phone face down. I carried it into the kitchen when I went for water. I stopped in the middle of conversations because I had read the first line of a notification. Once, Hannah was telling me about a customer who had shipped his own house keys across the country by mistake. My phone lit up beside my plate, and I lost the rest of her story. "You disappeared," she said. "I'm sitting right here." That isn't what I meant. I asked her to finish the story. She did, but the moment had changed. Audrey's messages became more frequent. She wondered whether we had ended too quickly. She said she sometimes drove past places we used to visit. She asked whether I ever thought about our old apartment, even though it had been my apartment before she moved in and remained mine after she left. I still did not answer. I also did not block her. One morning, Hannah stayed at my place while I went to the gym. She was getting ready for work when I returned, standing near the table with her jacket already on. My phone was exactly where I had left it beside the coffee maker. Hannah looked at me. Audrey messaged you. I stopped removing my jacket. She lifted one hand before I could speak. I didn't open anything. Her name came up on the screen. So did the beginning of the message. There were older notifications underneath it. It's nothing. Hannah's expression changed immediately. Nothing. I haven't answered her. That isn't what I asked. You didn't ask anything. Fine. Why is your former girlfriend sending you messages often enough that several of them are still on your screen? I walked past her and picked up the phone. Audrey's newest message said she wanted to talk, just once, to see how I was doing. I locked the screen. I told you. I don't respond. Hannah set her bag on the chair. You keep calling it nothing because calling it unfinished would require you to do something. That irritated me because it sounded too close to the truth. There is nothing unfinished. I haven't seen her. I haven't called her. I haven't sent one message. I believe you. That slowed me down. You do? Yes. I don't think you've met her. I don't think you're planning to go back. I'm not accusing you of breaking some technical rule. Then what are we arguing about? The fact that you think rules are the whole point. She walked to the window and adjusted the blind so the morning light reached the jade plant. I'm building something with you, Ben. I'm not interested in being temporary comfort while part of you keeps waiting to see what Audrey says next. I'm not waiting. You read every preview. That doesn't mean anything. You change when they arrive. I looked toward the kitchen because looking at her felt harder. Hannah continued. I won't be a replacement. I won't be proof that you can still be wanted. And I won't stand inside a space you've kept open for someone who already left. She hurt me. I said. I know. She spent months preparing to leave and gave me one conversation. Now she gets lonely and sends messages like we both made some calm decision together. Then tell her that. I don't owe her an explanation. Maybe not. But you owe yourself a decision. I put the phone down harder than necessary. Blocking her would feel like admitting she still has power over me. Hannah nodded slowly. And refusing to make a decision gives her no power? I had no answer. She picked up her bag again. What kind of man are you choosing to be now? That's a little dramatic. No. Dramatic would be me checking your phone, demanding to read everything, or telling you to choose between us. I'm not doing any of that. So what are you doing? Going home for the night. The word home caught me off guard, even though Margaret's house was her home. She paid rent there. She had her own key, her own room, and a drawer full of clothes. Hannah did not begin collecting everything she had in my apartment. Her mug stayed beside the sink. Her book remained on the table. The plant stayed on the windowsill. I'm not ending this, she said. I'm also not pretending it doesn't matter. I stood near the door while she put on her jacket. I'm not asking you to choose between two women, she said. I'm asking you to stop using me to avoid choosing your own life. Then she left. I did not follow her. For several minutes, I stayed by the door listening to her steps move down the old wooden stairs. The apartment was quiet again, but it did not feel like it had before Hannah arrived. Back then, the emptiness had hidden everything. Now her mug was in the kitchen. Her book was open near the couch. The jade plant leaned slightly toward the window. The room looked occupied, and I was the one acting absent. I sat at the table and opened Audrey's message thread. I read all of it. There was no plan in her messages. No clear request to rebuild anything. She missed our routines. She missed feeling safe. She missed Sunday groceries, familiar restaurants, and knowing who would answer when she called. She missed a version of us with all the quiet months removed. She did not know that I cooked now. She did not know I had returned to the gym or started answering my sister. She did not know about Hannah's burned toast, her work stories, or the plant on my windowsill. Audrey missed a life that no longer existed. I had kept reading because part of me wanted her to regret leaving. Every message gave me a small piece of that. Then I carried that reaction into the life I was building with someone else. Hannah was not the reason I needed to close it. She was simply the first person who refused to let me call avoidance peace. I typed one message. Audrey, I hope you are doing well. I have moved forward, and I need to protect the life I am building now. We should not continue contacting each other. I wish you the best. I read it twice. Then I sent it and blocked her number. There was no satisfaction, no victory, just a clean silence that felt different from ignoring her. For the first time, I understood that waiting, avoiding, and finishing were not the same thing. I slept badly, but I slept. Early the next morning, I remembered the cafe Hannah liked near Frankfurt Avenue. She had mentioned that she sometimes took the window seat before her shift because the coffee was strong and nobody tried to rush her. I got dressed, checked the time, and left the apartment before I could turn the decision into another thing I postponed. Hannah was sitting in the window seat when I reached the cafe. She had a paper cup in front of her and her jacket folded over the back of the chair. She was dressed for work, and the copy shop badge was already clipped near her shoulder. She saw me before I reached the table. Her expression did not tell me to leave, but it did not make things easy either. "Can I sit?" I asked. She looked at the empty chair. "Yes." I sat across from her and placed my phone on the table. I did not slide it toward her. I just wanted it visible instead of hidden in my pocket. "I read the entire thread last night," I said. Then I sent Audrey one final message. Hannah waited. I told her I had moved forward and that we should stop contacting each other. Then I blocked her. She looked at me for several seconds. "Did she answer before you blocked her?" "I don't know. I sent it and finished it." Hannah wrapped both hands around her coffee. "I'm glad you made a decision. I'm not telling you because I expect credit." "Good. I mean it. You were right. Not replying wasn't the same as closing it." She nodded, but she still looked guarded. "I never wanted control of your phone," she said. "I don't want to be the person who checks your messages or gives you a list of people you're allowed to talk to. I know. I want honesty, and I want both of us to protect what we're building while we're building it." I looked out the window for a moment. People were walking past with coffee cups and work bags. A delivery truck stopped across the street. Everything outside looked ordinary, which helped. I kept thinking that blocking Audrey would prove she still mattered. I said. But every time she sent something, I reacted. Then I carried that reaction into the room with you. Hannah did not interrupt. I wasn't protecting myself. I was staying connected to the version of me she left. And what version was that? The one who waited for things to happen and called it peace. Hannah looked down at the table. "That's the part one was afraid of," she said. "Not that you were secretly planning to go back. I was afraid you would stand still long enough that the past would keep making decisions for you. I did that for more than a year. And now I'm trying not to." She took a drink of coffee. I knew this was the part where I could ruin everything by saying something large and polished that sounded good, but meant nothing. So I told her the plain truth. "You didn't rescue me." Hannah's eyes moved back to mine. "I know. You made it harder for me to keep pretending I didn't want a life." She stayed quiet. "Before you showed up, I went to work, came home, and waited for the next day. I kept the apartment functional because that was easier than making it personal. Then you started opening the blinds. You made breakfast from almost nothing. You bought a plant because my window looked empty. You came home from work with stories about people who could not operate printers. One man tried to copy a sandwich. I remember. That was an important day." I smiled, but only briefly. "You got here needing help, and you worked from the first morning to make sure you would not need it forever. You found a job. You found your own room. You refused to start anything with me until you had somewhere else to sleep. I needed to know I could leave. And last night you did." Her expression tightened slightly. "I didn't want to. That matters more." She watched me carefully. I continued before I lost the nerve. "You're honest when it would be easier to let something slide. You don't accept vague answers. You notice when I disappear even if I'm still standing in the room. And you were willing to walk away for a night rather than accept half of me." Hannah's eyes lowered. "I'm not Audrey's replacement, Ben." "I know. Do you?" "Yes." I leaned forward. "You didn't fill the place Audrey left. You made me realize I didn't want to keep living around an empty place." For the first time since I sat down, Hannah's shoulders relaxed. She reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm still keeping my room," she said. "I assumed you would. For several months, at least. That sounds reasonable. I'm not moving back because we had one honest conversation. That also sounds reasonable. And I'm still angry. I assumed that too." She held my hand a little tighter. "But I want to keep dating you." The relief I felt was immediate, but I did not turn it into a celebration. She had not erased the problem. She had simply agreed that we could keep working on what came next. "When does your shift start?" I asked. She checked the time. "The owner changed the schedule. I don't have to go in until this afternoon." "So what are you doing until then?" Hannah looked through the window toward the street. "I was going to sit here and make you worry." "Was it working?" "Very well." We finished our coffee and left together. The morning was cool and clear. We walked without rushing, passing the bus stop, a closed shop, and the small market where Hannah had bought the jade plant. She glanced toward the entrance. "Have you overwatered it?" "I have followed the instructions." "You searched for instructions?" I'm an inventory coordinator. We respect documentation. That plant has received more research than your toaster. The toaster refused cooperation. We reached my building and found the elevator doors open with no elevator behind them. Hannah looked into the empty space from a safe distance. That seems promising. It's been considering retirement. We took the stairs. On the third floor, we passed apartment 3B. Hannah slowed for half a second and looked at the faded number beside the empty door. That was a bad plan, she said. Denise's? Mine. Driving 4 hours without a backup. It worked out strangely well. That does not make it a good plan. We continued to 3E. I unlocked my door and opened it. The first time Hannah stood there, she had a heavy bag, a nearly dead phone, and no idea where she would sleep. I had left the door open because she needed to know she could leave. Now she had her own room, her own key, her own job, and somewhere else she could be. She stepped inside anyway. Hannah went straight to the windowsill and examined one of the jade plant's leaves. It looks fine, she said. I told you. I said it looks fine. Don't become proud. The apartment was still small. The radiator still made noise. The dining table still had work papers at one end. Nothing had become perfect, but the blinds were open. There was food in the kitchen. Hannah's mug was beside mine. The plant stood in the light. She had knocked on the wrong door. I had spent more than a year refusing to open any door at all. I nearly missed the right beginning because of it.